You just got started in Manor Lords, and you have no idea what you're doing because the tutorial did a pretty mediocre job of figuring it out. Well, fun fact, the most important thing early on is that you can build roads anywhere, but removing them removes the entire road. So if you build a road that's nice and long and windy and exciting like this one, you want to remove it, just press Alt. There you go. Costs you nothing. Your villies, well, it only speeds up the oxen, but your villies like to be connected to it. And also it's important to be connected to the trade network. Next up, you can build plots of different sizes. Each size determines how many families can live there, up to 2. So you make a couple small ones, and you've got a nice little space for 1 family apiece. Or you can press the minus button, reduce the plot divisions. Boom, there you go. 2 family plot there. And almost everyone should have a backyard extension, as that is how you get a whole bunch of different fanciness. These are pretty much how you get food and crafting goods as you go into the early and later game. The only 2 things that it matters which size you have of the plot are vegetable gardens, because then they can plant more delectable veggies, and apple orchards, which I haven't had a lot of success with. They're more of a late game, but then they plant more trees. Everything else, whether it's chickens, or goats or anything like that, will be the same amount, dependent on the size of the plot. But I guess we're tying this into tip number 2, which is plot size. But when you upgrade to level 3, the amount of families doubles. So if it's a 1 size, it's now 2. If it's a 2 size, it's now 4. So this means you can essentially get more bang for your buck with the doubles. And I almost always start out with the doubles in order to make sure you have enough families. You got to be a little careful, though, because if you upgrade into something like a brewery or a cobbler shop or what have you, every family in that home, whether it's 1, 2, or 4, will be that sort of artisan, and they can't do any other jobs. All right, that's their job now, and if they're not doing it, they're not doing anything. So you got to be careful in adding on too many before you can use it, because otherwise you're not going to have any loyal workers to help progress your economy. Another thing, tip number 3, or whatever number we're on, the marketplace. The marketplace, if you're wondering why your town and people aren't getting food, the marketplace you build first will always fill up, no matter what. You make it with 50 stall locations, they will try to fill up all 50 in that first one. So I've gotten in the habit of making relatively small areas and then adding them as needed. Like you got another one over here, got one over here, so that way they can distribute along the roads a little easier, as opposed to being in one centralized location. Do you recommend big backyards for the level 3 artisans? Just going back to that one. It depends. Where things like the cobbler shop or most of the item crafters that aren't basic needs, you probably don't need big backyards. Oh wait, you meant in size, not double plot families. When it comes to the artisans, I usually prefer 1 or 2 family homes. The brewery is the one that I make the exception for, because everyone needs ale. And the more they need ale, the more they need ale. You know how it goes. So, that one needs a higher volume and more people to work it. But, otherwise, you don't need a big backyard. As long as the backyard exists, it doesn't matter. Could be studio apartment or the entirety of the zone. Same amount of productivity on everything but the vegetables and apple orchards. So, working the stalls at the market. The most convenient way to do it is just man the storehouse. More people in the storehouse means more people working at the market. Technically, people will figure out their jobs, and any idle workers will go work at the market, stuff like that. But it's much more convenient to have the people working at the storehouse do it. All right, and then tip number 4. 4, is that what we're on? So the trade post is the way you make money. You can make money, one, from level 2 families and level 3 families based on the housing. When you upgrade the housing, you can get more progression, but it also comes with its own requirements. So every level 2 family gets you 1 regional wealth up here. 1 regional wealth per month. Level 3 families are worth 2. So that's a decent amount of money, which pales in comparison to the trading post. Trading post, which is how you make most of it. Usually I start out by selling stone or vegetables. Stone, literally 1 a piece, but there's usually enough of it. You only need maybe 60 stone for your entire settlement. It's clay that is used for roof tiles. So stone is just for the church, granaries, and the manor. Otherwise, it is not used for anything, at least at the moment. And this was implemented, if you saw some streamers beforehand, this was actually implemented with the release. You got to be a little careful. I've gotten in the habit of every month checking the trading post, because if you sell too many, the market becomes oversupplied. And there is no way to control automatically how many you're selling. So I sold shoes to everyone, and I sold them an extra pair. I sold them even more shoes. And now, shoes are only 1 silver, which is not enough, considering the leather to make them is 12 times that. So, kind of got to keep track of that, especially if you're doing a lot of buying and selling. Another key part. All right, we're on tip number 5, something like that. You can set work areas. So you don't want the deer to get scared off, or the berries, which I should be harvesting over there. Oh yeah, tip number 4.9. You can hold the tab key for this overlay, the info overlay, which gets a little convoluted later on, but allows you, especially like you got a forester's hut or forager's hut, both in the trees, a little easier to see than trying to figure out where it is out there. The tab key, we can go over. So that's a level 1. That means no backyard extension. No one lives there. Needs food, needs clothing, and all that. It's not supplied currently, which I think is a little weird. There's no one living there, so why are we bringing supplies at all? But just that's what those mean. Everyone needs ale. I've got some. It's a dry county, all right? At the moment, as the supply lines are a little rough. But you can set the work area. This is most relevant for logging camps and woodcutters' lodges, but also you can do it for foresters' huts if you want to plant some trees in certain areas. Also could use it for production facilities, but that's a bit more convoluted. So you got to be a little careful, because once you've set it, you can't see it. So be careful to start out, but you can always reset it if you'd like by going to advanced. Another thing, hitching posts do not need to be near anywhere productive in order to get your oxes. This is 6, I think. You can just jam your hitching posts in the corner. You can make stables out of them, fine, but it's not any more efficient. So I usually just have the ox lane over here, the Oxford University, if you would. Which ideally, like if they're sitting there idle, they're not being productive. They're like children. You got to use them if you have them. So, well, now, number 7. We're at number 7 here. So this is map reading. So since you can't currently start your settlement, you can't choose where you settle, I wouldn't be ashamed of re-rolling once or twice just to make sure you have some resources nearby, because sometimes the game spawns you nowhere close to the resources. Like, I've spawned in an area like, let's see, like here. And in this zone, yes, the Baron has taken the rest of the map. We'll talk about that momentarily. So I wouldn't be ashamed of re-rolling. But another thing about the map. If you see the rich deposits for minerals have way more. But they're not infinite unless you get the deep mine upgrade thingy. Which gives you infinite resources. You still get like 1,000, something like that, but that one essentially guarantees you iron or clay. Stone is the least valuable. You don't need stone, as I mentioned. And you can always trade for those resources, but that gets expensive. So that can be the later game option. But if your zone has 2 rich deposits, that means fertility is going to be bad. All right? Because it is. Whatever plants you want to put down, not going to be great. But if it only has 1 rich deposit, well, the other rich deposit is the land. So keep a lookout for that. And it's kind of randomized. Even though the map is the same zones and like the same layout, the resource deposits and where they are and which ones they are is random to an extent. So keep that in mind. And now, in order to combat the Baron and his claims, there's a couple things. This is tip 8. And if you're on, this is default difficulty of restoring the peace, which I think is what most people are going to play. So, the Baron will claim territory. He doesn't live there, he just claims it. And that's kind of a dick move. But unless, I'd say, is figure out 1 territory nearby, in which case we've done here with Jimmyland. Figure out that territory, and if he claims that, you'll fight over it. Otherwise, you can eventually get the rest with influence. Influence is gained by 1, destroying bandit camps, winning battles. Both, ideally. The Baron will also attempt to deal with the bandit camps. But if he claims something on the other side of the map, probably just gotta let it. It's kind of weirdly tuned right now as we're looking at this. But you gain influence, that's the easiest way. You get like 200-300 per battle. Another one is by, and this is the most consistent, is by paying tithes to the church. So here, you put a percentage of surplus food. So if you're generating a ton of food, then you put a bit to the church, and every month you get a bit more influence. And that's used to make sure that you have the divine right to claim new territories. I feel like this mechanic needs to be fleshed out a bit more. But once you scale up your production, end up getting a few hundred a month. So it gets easy enough. Like, we're like 5 years in. I got 2.8k influence. I've only fought 1 or 2 battles so far. And just side note, we're just going to tie it in. Side note on the battles. The militia, you got to remember, is from your town. It's always easier to just pay off some mercenaries. You just got to be careful that where they arrive. Because the mercenaries always arrive at the edges of the map. So if they arrive in, say, Jimmyland, they're probably going to be either from the north side or from the east over there. And then they have to walk. So you got to be a little careful on the timing of when you're sending them in, too. But overall, fighting the Baron I've found to be a bit unwieldy, but once you get a few groups of militia and the mercenaries, you should be able to at least fight over 1 or 2 territories. Eventually you get to the point where you have enough economy, assuming mercenaries are still available, to deal with it. But I think by the time you have multiple settlements down, and that's the real struggle, is getting to the second one, it's easy enough to deal with the Baron. And honestly, the game isn't so much about winning in that sense as building up your town and your city and all that. Oh yeah. Tip 9. Agriculture is important to civilization. So, first things first, when you spawn in, or you settle initially, like my first town, Brandenburg over here, I already knew had poor fertility, but it did have, you need at least 2 or 3 types of food. We'll cover the food here. In this case, I've got a rich deposit of wild animals. In my opinion, that's the best. Unlimited meats. And this is because you can use the development points for trapping and advanced skinning, which doubles the amount of meat. Stonks. On top of that, you have one of the only 2 policies in the game, which is hunting grounds, which is wild animals on rich deposits breed twice as fast. So essentially, I can't hunt them fast enough. I have a hunting camp fully manned, unlimited meat. I trade some of it away, send some of it to the other zone. So, very nice. Another thing is vegetable gardens. I always start out so far with at least 1 or 2. I think 1 just to start. But with a large plot of it, you'll get enough vegetables to serve as like your secondary food source. So between meat, berries, and vegetables, that should keep you covered for a couple of years. You don't really want to start farms, agriculture till like probably year 3 or 4 is when I find myself having the space to do so. Then past that, you can use chicken coops once you start getting some income. So part of the reason you go for the vegetable garden is because you can scale it. 2, it only costs 15 silver. Oh, another thing. Tip $. This is just a $. Do not spend all your money. All right, you need at least 15. 1 extra ox at the start and 1 vegetable garden. That's it. If you spend all your money, it's going to be a massive pain. In order to, like, that's... The game doesn't really tell you this. I'm telling you this. Don't go under 15 silver, or it will be a struggle to open up a trade route, which now they're quite expensive for me. But a trade route for stone or for planks or whatever, which is not ideal, but usually only costs like 6 to 10 to start. So you can get that started, and that's most of your money. The only other way you'd be getting money is monthly with the trickle from level 2 or level 3 houses. So it could take months to just get enough to open up a trade route, and you can't spend anything else during that. So not ideal. Yes. So be careful. And now tip $.2. Do you need a trade route for exporting? Yes, you do. Tip $.2 is tax is a wealth tax, not an income tax. So it is sometimes in your best interest to wait a few months and let your citizens build up more wealth, because you get whatever your tax of it is. Currently, I'm trying to grow Oh. You know, this is a 15 tips video. All right, it is now. I've altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it further. But population growth. So, if you're at 50% to 75%, you'll get about 1 family per month moving in, assuming you have housing. Like, I have 72 living space currently with basic math skills, which I arguably have. I only have 68 families. So that means people move in. Like about 1 a month. Here in Jimmyland, people love it. All right, but we don't have housing, so it's not relevant. But it's at 80%, which is high population growth if you get it up there, which is usually around 2 a month if you have the housing. So that is the benefit of maintaining high approval. There's no benefit, to my knowledge, past the 75. So if you keep it at 76% at all times, I think that's ideal. So if you tax them to 76%, you're perfect. Though, obviously, having it higher gives you a bit of a buffer there. So, all right. Tip 11, 12, something. Development points are not shared. They are specifically for the territory you're in. So if Brandenburg has the extra meat and trade logistics with better deals, essentially I've turned this into my import hub. Whereas my other town, for example, Jimmyland, is more for farming. We got rye, which is just like wheat plus. It's like the grain she tells you not to worry about. Heavy plow. Like these are for this set of it. It's easy enough to get a few development points. You just need some extra timber. Tip 12.23. If you're running out of timber constantly because you want planks, you can set a reserve on the saw pit. to make sure they don't chop up all your timber. Tip 12.32. Only one family can work the saw pit, by the way. Putting more families is not helpful, though sometimes having multiple saw pits can be helpful. This is because only one person can work the saw pit at once. So, tip 12.378. You don't have to assign people to hitching posts. It can help you organize, but idle workers, essentially, unassigned, or those who are just, like, for example, the saw pit only takes 1 out of 3. They'll go guide the ox to places it needs to be. In this case, it maybe be for the saw pit. Tip 13.1. You only need Jesus when people die. Otherwise, there's no point of having anyone in the church. At least not currently. Your churchly needs will be fulfilled. Whether or not there are people in the church. The point of having someone in the church is to dig graves. Tip Jesus. Technically right now, and I think it's a bug, when you upgrade to the level 2 church, you don't actually have to finish construction. It's only after you start construction and put the first piece will the church level increase. So technically, you could pause it there. Don't do this. But technically, you could pause it there, and you would still get both levels of the church and potentially upgrade to level 3. Tip 14. For mining pits and for like clay and stuff like that, I think we got some more in Jimmyland. Yeah. Oh yeah, the T key flips between your territories, by the way. Control C removes the UI so you can look at your beautiful town. And I rebound the middle mouse key to a side mouse key because I like using that to move it around. Those are free. Those tips are free. They don't count. So, usually you only need one person on the mining pit. The real issue is having people in a storehouse to bring it from the mining pit. Putting more people doesn't usually expedite it very much. Tip, next. If you're struggling, no, I'm sorry. Didn't have one there. Oh. In order to make ale, it's a 2-step process. You need barley, which you put into a malt house, and then that malt house needs to go into a brewery. You're like, oh, but where's the brewery? Trick question. The brewery is a workshop extension. So, it is a house workshop. Whereas for bread, you need a windmill. So, they go take the grains out of the field. Eventually, they'll bring it back to the farmhouse. And then eventually they'll thresh it into grain, get all that shit out of it, and then comb it out, take the toothbrush, and then you got grain. And then the windmill, they beat the shit out of the grain, and then they sprinkle some water on it in the oven, or if you get the development point, you can make one of your houses into bakeries, which are apparently better for some reason than the actual dedicated building. So that's like the next one for me, but that, and then you'll have bread. This is a pretty involved process, and it takes a while to get it going, but once you get the bread going, you essentially have infinite bread. So, it only takes, like, each field. This is more fields than you need to power 2 settlements. I'm testing farming things. You don't need this many fields. They're all 1 Morgan size. So the reason, tip, farming. The reason that they're this size and this shape and boring and not completely unnatural is because when you get the heavy plow research and you have an ox assigned to the farmhouse, they have real issues with their brains. Not just your peasants, but the ox. If it's not right angles, the ox doesn't plow it correctly. And if it's too large, they struggle to figure out their tasks. So much like your villagers, you need to break things down into smaller parts. These are all 1 Morgan, which is apparently how long it took a dude with an ox to plow a field in a morning or something like that. But anyways, it's 1 of the measuring units on each one of these. So that's what I've been using. But I'm not, the agriculture is a bit complex, but effective. All right, tip. Let's wrap this up. If you like and subscribe, you can find more tips, maybe. Or just watch the stream. Thank you for watching. Stay chill.